What is going on, everyone, and welcome to WreckTalk. And today we have a special guest, which probably needs no introduction on this channel. I'm currently, he can't see it, but I'm currently wearing the Brent Key hat. And he hasn't paid me to say any of this, nor is this some sort of paid promotion. I reached out to him just because I'm interested. But look, Section 103 is the go-to place, really, for tech apparel. It's where I go to. That you get the Key cut off sweatshirt, which, by the way, Sea Dog brought a cut off sleeve to Brent Key to sign, and Brent Key mentioned that before one of his press conferences.
That is awesome.
Before that, but we got the man behind Section 103, Stephen Little here. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing fantastic, man. So, I looked on your website before this, and most companies' website will have a very self-indulgent about section, and there's none of that with you. So I have to know, how did this come about? Why did you do this? How did you get into this business? We got to know.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll try to keep the answer somewhat short, but it's a little bit of a winding road as to kind of how we got here. So I'm a graphic designer. I went to tech, was a business major, had no idea what I wanted to do, and kind of got interested in advertising and design late in school, and ended up interning at some places and going back to design school shortly after Georgia Tech to build a portfolio and get a job. And so my professional career has been in product design, so app design and website design for the last 16 years. And um, along the way, I would do the occasional freelance work, right? And always been a huge sports fan, and sports branding, especially, just has always kind of caught my eye. The design of logos and uniforms and courts and fields and things like that. And so I always kind of stayed in tune with that world, if you will. And so this long story starts with years ago. I had a blog when blogs were a big thing called the Sports Design Blog. And it was, I wrote about those things, courts and fields and uniforms and stuff. And I wrote a couple posts about Georgia Tech. And this was, 20, I don't know, 10, 11. The brand was a mess, visually, just a mess, all sorts of shades of gold. The uniforms were Russell and they were terrible. And so I wrote a few posts about just how bad it was, and here are some things I would do to fix it. And it got a lot of attention in the, message board and social media community.
Are you talking about with Russell Athletic, just how they were doing things? Okay.
It's Russell, but it was Georgia Tech too, right? They just they weren't really paying attention to their own brand standards and guidelines, and they were letting apparel manufacturers and people do all sorts of different things, and it just was it was gross, basically. And so that got a lot of attention. I ended up meeting with the athletic director at the time, Mike Babinski, and just kind of sharing some of my thoughts. Yeah. And it really never necessarily led anywhere. And then one day I got an email from Sean Bedford, who played football at Tech, and he had just finished up and was kind of putting together a proposal about some things the athletic department could do to help a number of things, but one of them was the brand. And so he had seen my post, and we started talking. We put together kind of a proposal to the athletic department. I ended up meeting with some people there, and they loved it. And I wouldn't say anything necessarily changed right away from there, but it kind of introduced me to some people there. They knew what my interests were and kind of what my skill set was. And so eventually I started doing some freelance work, design work for the athletic department. I was designing logos for special events, a lot of apparel, actually, coincidentally, that were either for the team to wear on the sidelines or giveaways for fan giveaways and things like that. And it just kind of reawakened this passion for designing apparel when I started thinking about doing design. Really, the things I love doing, I would make websites and stuff, but I always loved designing T-shirts for some reason. When I was in a band in high school and college, when we would play intramural sports and stuff, I'd always design the T-shirts and always loved it. I've always loved designing physical things more than interactive, even despite my career being all interactive stuff.
Right.
So it kind of awakened that passion, and I started talking to somebody at Georgia Tech, what would it look like for me to get a license to be able to produce, officially licensed Georgia Tech apparel. I had done some research and read that it was pretty hard.
Yeah.
To get accepted, it was pretty cost prohibitive. You had to be a pretty sizable apparel company already. And they said, well, why don't you just talk to CLC, which is Collegiate Licensing Company here in Atlanta, because that's who handles our licensing, and see what they have to say. And I met with them, and it turns out those things I had read and assumed used to be very true. And they had kind of loosened a lot of that to allow more companies to kind of enter the marketplace. And so it wasn't that cost prohibitive. Um, CLC manages 90 some percent of school licenses. There are
So
a
what
few
is
others that
CLC? Is that like some agency they are collectively a part of?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a company that manages all of the licensing and royalties and merchandise for colleges. It was
Okay.
started, I don't know, a few decades ago actually by I think an Alabama athletic director who realized like there's no like it's the wild wild west out there. And so um they still have 90 some percent of schools. There are a few competitors that have kind of popped up that have some other schools, but so I met with them and you apply through their whole system and everything, but really every decision is up to the school, right? So I submit my application through CLC, and then Georgia Tech has the ability to say yes or no, we will accept this company as a licensee. And so as a startup, obviously I usually wouldn't get a shot. And I think just, knowing people helped. I didn't actually know anyone in licensing at Georgia Tech, but I knew people in the athletic department who said, here's what he's done for us. And, he's, got his finger on the pulse of Georgia Tech and kind of knows what the people want. And I had seen for years all the things people were complaining about not being able to find, right? The right shade of gold and this logo on stuff and all these things. So I went to them with a proposal of I have a little bit of apparel experience because I failed to mention I did a side business with some buddies that was apparel. And it really just kind of taught me, a little bit more about materials and printing techniques and stuff like that, and how to set up a Shopify store, which is what the site is run on. And so I kind of had a little bit of knowledge of that, and really went in as a full on startup, having never produced my own apparel. But they said yes, and it we can get further into it, but it took off pretty quickly and has been pretty successful on a Georgia Tech scale. It's remained a side business, and yeah, we can talk more about that.
I'm sure that's surprising, and I hope you can speak to this, or whatever you're comfortable with speaking on. Like I've had some of my own dealings with tech, and my experience, and even from apparel, not necessarily apparel companies, but companies that sell, like, what is it, College Town at Town Center, I think, has a big college store. And I talked to them, and they basically said, like, tech is super stingy with a lot of stuff, with their branding, with who can sell it and what can be sold and what specific color. I've sort of had that experience myself with tech being difficult about things. Was that How did that play into this? Did you have that experience, or was that not your experience?
So I think I got pretty lucky in that when I applied, I had some people at Tech kind of backing me, right? Like I
Yeah.
said, I had never met anyone in licensing, and I have come to find out that what you're saying is true, both with my own. So once you're approved, you have to submit every design that you want to create for approval, and the school individually can say yes or no to that, right? And they can say no because you're violating this, or you're doing this to our logo, or we don't allow these things together, or that's not the right color. And so I have found now that I've been accepted that Georgia Tech is yeah, they're pretty stingy, like you said. They want to make sure that, and in some ways that's very good, right?
Sure.
They're finally protecting their brand and making it consistent, and I applaud that. But then sometimes I try to do something a little bit more creative, or alter the logo to make it fit a concept, and I get a no. Whereas other schools, I've since learned, will say, yeah, absolutely no problem. Like, you're not doing any harm to us, so go for it. Like, it fits the concept. So they're definitely a little bit more stingy in that. And in terms of accepting licensees as well. Like, I've since learned, despite the fact that I got in. So I'm happy that I did, and I've had a great working relationship with licensing since. Um, but yeah, I would agree they're on the stingier side compared to other schools I've experienced.
So have you submitted as a design that you thought, like, obviously there's no issue with that, and then that was like, no, we can't do it?
Um, I've been denied a few, but I think every time I was denied, I thought like, oh, we'll see how this goes. I'm not sure this is gonna fly.
So they did not have to approve the fight, win, drink, get naked thing? shirt.
So that one, if you'll notice, so check out our site. There's a fight, win, drink, get naked shirt. It doesn't say that. It uses like 4 icons to represent the cheer. I emailed about that and was like, look, I know this probably is gonna fly in terms like a fully licensed shirt. It doesn't use any marks or anything, but I originally made it in on a gold t-shirt with navy print. And to their credit, of course, they weren't gonna, probably let me put that one out there with Georgia Tech approval, but they basically came back and said, "Look, you can make this and sell this, but you can't put it on the Georgia Tech page, and you can't put it in Georgia Tech colors." So if you notice, it's on a different page of the site, and it is gray and black.
Yeah.
So they basically have no affiliation with it. They're okay with me producing it, but it's not on the Tech page. I never promote it next to a Georgia Tech shirt, so you kind of have to find it, but it's there.
Yeah, basically did the Blink 182 album cover thing, which I think
Yeah.
is
Yes.
awesome. Uh,
That's a great point. There's a Blink 182 album cover literally sitting over my shoulder right there.
Me too. You can't see
Maybe
it.
that was oh, that's amazing. Maybe there was some subconscious, design choices there, but yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, man, just for me as a tech fan, as someone who went to tech as well, I think there's a huge like thirst and want for stuff more down that line for tech fans. Like the Thriller Dome shirt is awesome. Some of this kind of like more, I don't know if it's the right word, but deeper into the lore. That's a very tech way of putting it.
Yeah.
Stuff. So I love that.
Yeah, no, I love that you picked up on that, and so I'm gonna fast forward a little bit here, but so it's been a Georgia Tech only brand for 4 years. It's been a side project, and I had, some time on my hands. I was between jobs late last year, and so I took that opportunity to spend a lot more time on Section 103, and what I did in that was start investigating what does it look like to add schools. I've always wanted to, I just haven't had time, and grow this business, and so I ended up meeting with a lot of school licensing directors and excuse me, just launched an LSU collection on Thursday. But what I was pitching to these schools when I kind of talked to them is I said, here's what I've done with Georgia Tech. And what I'm really trying to do is just like you just said, I'm trying to dive deep into kind of the ethos and the history and the traditions of a school, not in like a vintage way necessarily, but I'm gonna go find those things like the fight, win, drink, get nakeds of the school and find those cheers, find those restaurants like we have a juniors grill shirt that's been closed for a decade. Find the things that students and alumni just love and resonate with and make apparel based on that because it's like a deeper cut, right? It's I get this. It's almost like insider information. And not all of my apparel is that, but I'm trying to definitely make some concepts for each school that are like that. In addition to evaluating the marketplace like I did when I started Georgia Tech and just make what's missing, right? Like with tech, it was a lot of just like, give me the right gold.
Yeah.
Or for example, when I launched the brand, Georgia Tech had just unveiled their at that time new word mark. So the way Georgia Tech is typed out, with kind of they call them the stingers on some of the letters. That was new and it wasn't on anything. Adidas had like one shirt. So just kind of trying to find like what are others not doing? And then in addition, any concepts I come up with, I'm going to try to kind of dig deep and find those references.
I know you probably won't be able to do it. I do have one request. I want a hat just like you have on, made of
Mhm.
corduroy. You brought up
Oh,
vintage, so a corduroy hat I would wear it every day.
I love it. No, I can do that. I've learned a lot about manufacturing and stuff like that. Um, my hats are made somewhere different than my shirts and hoodies and all that. And so, with the hats, I basically have full control over. I can do whatever I want, and it's been a really fun kind of experiment and learning a ton. But the hats have done well, and I wear hats a lot, so I was excited to have my own hats to wear. And I'm glad, like you said, I can't see you right now. That I almost put on the coach hat, and we'd have been matching. So I'm glad I went with this one.
Well, let's back up and talk about that. So you went to Skeller School of Business, but
Mhm.
you have a graphic design background, which is, if I had to guess, uh, 20% of what you're doing in this business as far as what you're spending your time on.
Correct. Yeah,
Um,
that's a good guess.
so
It's the most fun part probably, and it's I love coming up with the concepts and stuff. But you're right. Now I'm running the whole business.
so what
I
did
do
it
love when it's
look
sorry. Yeah, go
like
ahead.
to um what was your experience learning all this other stuff? Manufacturing, pricing,
Yeah.
margin, and all of this stuff. What did that look like for you?
A lot of trial and error. A lot of just kind of looking around at what others are doing. I did go to a conference the beginning of this year that was a big actually like licensed merchandise conference, and I had no shame, and I just went like booth to booth and just picked people's brains. Like, here's what stage I'm at. When you were at this stage, what were you doing? What mistakes have you made? And the nice thing is I came away from that conference actually validating a lot of what I've done. I kind of expected to go there and learn like, oh wow, I am doing this like so inefficiently or so wrong, or my margins are crap. And
Yeah.
I actually kind of came away like very like, okay, like I kind of do know what I'm doing, but I very much just stumbled into it all along the way. Like I have just had to learn every piece of it, right? Setting up a business, getting business insurance, applying to CLC, setting up an entire Shopify store. Yeah, like you said, figuring out the best and most efficient way to produce stuff and how to price it. And I've done a little bit of wholesaling in the last couple of years where I'm selling to like the in stadium stops shops at Georgia Tech, and kind of learning what margins look like there. And I'm kind of just making it up as I go and learning as I go. Um, and leaning on others that have done it, leaning on the internet. Um, sometimes just making mistakes, just trying stuff. But it's worked out for the most part pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of came out of nowhere on my radar. Like just all of a
Yeah,
sudden, we had this quality uh, apparel brand, and just from people I've talked to in my experience, like people will pay good money for a good quality product.
right.
They will, especially with with college uh, football stuff. So that's interesting. What would you say is the biggest mistake you've made through this process, and what have you learned from it?
It's a good question. I think there are definitely times where so with my shirts in particular, well, with everything I do actually so far, I print or manufacture in bulk first, and I have inventory, right? There's no like print on demand aspect to any of this, which is great in terms of not carrying inventory, but it's process wise and cost wise and print quality wise not exactly what I wanted to go for. So, a lot of money that I make, I'm putting right back into like, all right, let's print more of this. And I've definitely overestimated how many of certain shirts to make. The NIL stuff has been an interesting experiment with me. I got really excited when you actually have to apply for a separate license for NIL, a separate license for vintage. There's all these kind of categories of license you can carry. And when I got the NIL Georgia Tech co-branded license, I was really excited to try it out. And there have been some great successes and some cases where I printed lots of shirts of an athlete and then didn't sell many, and then I'm stuck with them, right? And then they transfer or they graduate, and you're like, well, I'm never going to sell any of those again. So those have been kind of some of the bigger misses, and just some like, when things were going well, I was like, oh, I'm going to print, X number of these shirts, and then it just isn't as popular as you think it's going to be. And so I think having probably too much inventory of certain things has been my biggest learning, but yeah,
Yeah,
still figuring out.
that is one of the first things I thought about when I was doing this. I just last night had someone on about the house settlement, so I don't know if that is going to change how you do NIL type branding. I
Right.
imagine it is.
I
Um,
yeah, I imagine too, and I've not kept up with it as much as you have, so I'll I'll find that as we go.
Well, I'll tell you the secret is no one understands this. Like if you saw The Big Short, he's like, I don't even think the lawyers understand what they signed off on here. So it's going to be
Yeah.
a minute. But yeah, like you print a bunch of shirts for some guy, and then he transfers out, and I can't imagine how difficult that is for you because you have no way of knowing that. I mean,
Yeah,
unless a
yeah.
coach is talking to you, but the coaches don't even know. I'm sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah, so I think, lesson learned with NIL is probably don't print too many of them, until you kinda know, right? Like, and then every year it's yeah, like, "All right, please don't transfer," "Knock on wood, please don't get hurt," like, all those things affect, like, I'm printing stuff and this benefits you too, but, like, if something changes, we're all kinda out. So the Haynes King stuff has done well. I've done a few different shirts with him, and you get a noteworthy player like that that's getting like national attention, and obviously it's going to do a bit better. So lesson learned. But it's been fun to dabble in that world for sure.
Do you have to cut key into this? Because I think I don't. I'm not looking at your website at the moment, but you call it like the Brent Key hat and the key cut off
So
shirt.
I I call it the coach hoodie and the coach hat.
Okay, okay,
Um,
smart.
so right now, no, unless you just ruined it. But no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I mean he's aware of it. I've met him a couple times, but I think he just thinks it's funny that people want to wear what he's wearing. So um, yeah, those my top two sellers have been the Coach Key hoodie and the Coach Key hat. And part of that, so that's a good story, I think, of kind of part of what I've been able to do as a smaller company and be nimble and quick is when Coach Key won his first 2 games as an interim coach. I was sitting at the beach on vacation with my family watching him celebrate in his cutoff hoodie, and I was like, "People would wear this, and Adidas isn't gonna make it."
Yeah,
Did make it. Well, granted, it was long sleeve and he cut him off, but, like, the sideline apparel is just not available for tech fans, not the exact sideline apparel, and especially when Key's wearing older stuff, and so I quickly started looking through essentially product websites, like blank shirt websites. And I was like, I need to find a light gray, short sleeve, hooded t-shirt or sweatshirt that I can print on and found it and launched a pre-sale of that shirt that night. And had them out the door a couple weeks later. And so it's taken off. And now we have a couple colors of it. We have long sleeve, short sleeve. And then same thing with the hat. When I finally figured out my like manufacturing process for hats and stuff, the first thing I did, of course, was make the the coach hat. Because while it may not necessarily be like my favorite hat design, it is absolutely what everybody wants because the head coach of the football team is wearing it every Saturday. So yeah, it's been awesome. I've made it made a bunch of those ones.
yeah, and that's it's an interesting disadvantage you have just because you're not going to shoulder loss like a big company, but it's a massive advantage that you can react to things
Yeah.
quicker and like Adidas is never going to do something like that without having a very clear expectation of profit for it.
Yeah.
And you're not that you're not worried about profit, but you're going to be willing
Right.
to take a risk that they're not there just because you're a fan, right? You see the need for it where they wouldn't.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I'll take a swing on stuff, right? And opposite example of what we said before, lesson learned. Man, did I underestimate the desire for the coach hat.
Yeah.
Even when I made hats, I made the most quantity of that hat and sold out of them by lunch, I think. Yeah, by lunch the day I launched. And immediately was like, I need 6 times what we just made. Like, let's do more of these. So, lesson learned there too. Like, I knew it would be the most popular, but to what degree I had no clue.
Well, it's funny because before you launched that hat, Sea Dog and I were literally talking because I react to almost every key press conference, especially in season. And Sea Dog and I were watching it. We're like, man, where did he get that hat? Like, I want that hat so bad. And then I called him when I saw it on your website. I was like, dude, I just bought it. Don't worry about what it costs. I didn't even look. I just ordered it. So yeah, that was a big home run for you, I'm sure. So, well, yeah, we
For
kind
sure,
of
yeah.
talked about the manufacturing process. How about your experience now as a fan? Because this is kind of what informed your business in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Like, so did you grow up as a tech fan before you went to tech? You got accepted and then became a fan. How did that work?
Yeah, so I actually moved around a bit as a kid. I lived in Iowa until I was 10, Texas for a few years, and then I moved to Augusta, Georgia in middle school. So I actually grew up a huge Iowa State fan. And they're still my second team, but like anybody, pretty much, I think once you go undergrad somewhere, that kind of, takes the bigger chunk of your heart. So it
Sure.
was when I went to Tech that I became a fan. So I went to middle and high school in Georgia with no stake in the game, surrounded by like everybody, 90 something percent Georgia fans.
Gross.
Um, but like literally couldn't have cared less between Georgia and Georgia Tech when I was here. I was just all about Iowa State. And then as soon as I got to school, of course, that flipped and have been a huge Tech fan ever since.
That's awesome. And I'm assuming so you're calling it section 103. I'm assuming
Mhm.
that's where your season tickets are. That's in the East stand, I believe, too, right?
It's a good assumption, and it's not the case. So,
Oh, well, tell us.
yeah, no, that's what everybody kind of assumes. So when I started this company, I at least had the foresight to know I do want to add schools someday. When I don't know, but I want to. I want this to be a a full on college apparel company. And so I wanted the name to sound like a sports apparel company, but also have some hidden Georgia Tech meaning. And I didn't want it to be so obvious as like Rec Apparel or something that would like people would know, like, oh, that's a Georgia Tech brand.
Yeah,
So
like
I
what I
dug
did.
deep and made a long list of ideas. And what I stumbled on, I was just looking at like seating charts of the various stadiums. I kind of like the idea of like, oh, sections something, right? Or like the 400s or something like that. And so I was looking and uh, dug deep, but noticed that in both McCamish and at Bobby Dodd, Section 103 sits at the end of the home bench. So I liked the metaphor there of fans seeing themselves as an extension of the team, kind of like
Hmm.
sitting at the end of the bench. And so it's a deep cut, and but that was kind of the idea. Is like I don't want it to be that obvious. It's on like the about page of our website, so it's not like it's out there, but it was the idea of fans seeing themselves as kind of the extension of the team, sitting on the end of the home bench, and that could apply to all teams, right? Like I sit at the end of my team's home bench, so that's where that came from.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would have never guessed that. I don't know if you've stated that publicly
Yeah,
anywhere, but that's awesome.
yeah. No, I like the story, and it is. Yeah, it's pretty hidden. Like I said, it's on the about page of the site, but yeah, I like kind of the hidden meaning there.
So you mentioned moving now and adding another school. I have a feeling, I have an idea of how one way of how that came about. But tell us how you got into LSU of all schools. So you're going to the SEC now.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, so it kinda came about so at CLC, I've got, like, my rep, right, who kinda represents a number of schools, and I just started asking her, like, "What does it look like to add schools? Like, what is this process?" And, kinda learned from her every school's licensing director manages their entire program and has their own philosophy, right? And some schools have exclusive deals where we only work with these apparel brands. We're set, we're locked, we don't add anymore.
Hmm.
Some schools are very open and say, "Yeah, we'll take you, as long as you're not gonna do anything to like disparage the brand, like come on in." And so you kind of have to feel around and learn what schools are willing to accept new licensees, especially at my size, right? Like I'm not coming in as Adidas and saying like we want you. Everyone would say yes. So I had to go tell my story of like I'm going to dig deep and I'm going to you know research your students and your traditions and all these things. And um, so I mentioned that conference I went to. Basically, every licensing director in the country was at this conference, and so I started emailing and saying, would you be willing to meet while we're there? And I was trying to stick to the southeast, just to kind of have a regional, base. People like local companies, and schools of all sizes. So I talked to some non-power four schools. I talked to a few power four. They're obviously harder to kind of get their time and to get a yes from them. um, but LSU is one that the way he manages their program is kind of like, I like what you're doing. It's more options for our fans. You're gonna make money. We're gonna get a cut of it. Like, go for it. And so LSU was cool enough to give me that opportunity, and so I launched them first, just being a big recognizable school, and had a ton of fun. Went and visited campus, tried to kind of learn some of the traditions and stuff like that. But that's kind of how it goes about. You really just talk to each licensing director. I try to kind of build that relationship and get that yes before I go ahead and like actually apply through the system, right? Instead of just applying blindly. And so that's kind of the process I've been taking to add schools.
Yeah, that's got to be huge for you. I mean, obviously LSU is a massive brand. So yeah, that's awesome.
For sure, and I've been learning a lot, and we'll continue to learn a lot. I mean, it was only 6 days ago that we launched this, and obviously with Georgia Tech when I launched, like you said, I came out of nowhere and no one knew about my company because it didn't exist. Um, but I at least was kinda in that world already. I was on message boards. I had a little bit of a Twitter following, and so when I put it out there, it spread quickly just organically. I at first with Georgia Tech I don't think I paid a dime for any sponsorships or promotion or anything, and it blew up pretty quickly. With LSU, I'm obviously not part of that world, and so kind of had to go to the route of finding some content creators like yourselves to reach out and sponsor and find people with a lot of followers who could put it out there. And it's been a good launch, really. I just didn't even know what to expect, and so um, having to learn a lot about entering a new school and marketplace for sure.
That's awesome. I'll tell you who would never give you any trouble is YouTubers, man. Their apparel, like you probably do that no problem. But
Yeah.
anyway, is there something you wish I would have asked her that you want to talk about that I didn't ask you?
That's a great question. Hmm. I don't know. Not really. I mean, I like telling the story of starting it. It's been fun. I hope to grow it and continue to add schools and product types. I mean, I'm working on some stuff behind the scenes that I think tech fans will be really excited about in the fall. Um, and always pushing new designs. There's always a pull on our site. I like to be really interactive with fans and make sure I know we're printing what they want, right? So that's why I've kind of always got that pull at the bottom of what should we print next. And um yeah, I don't know. I'm just having a lot of fun learning. I think what I've realized through this is I really like being an entrepreneur and working for myself, but I do have a full-time job. So like
Yeah.
um until the point where this is big enough to not have one, it's kind of a taste of that. It means I'm busy all the time, but like I absolutely love doing pretty much every piece of this business. So it's been a lot of fun.
So I guess we'll end on. I mean, you kind of talked about it, but what does the future look like? Like it sounds like you would like this to be your full time thing. And well, I mean, what is the future of Section 103 in your estimation?
Yeah. No, I would love for it to be. I'd love to have a ton of schools, even more product categories than I've got now. And yeah, just continue, bringing quality apparel with interesting concepts to lots and lots of schools, right? Do what we started with tech, but always be a Georgia Tech branded heart.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, again, if you want Section 103 apparel, I have their website as my background here at section103.com. They have a ton of stuff. I mean, usually every other video I'm wearing something from Section 103. Again, they don't pay me to do that. I genuinely think they're a fantastic product. So again, Stephen, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.